Welcome, tiny television, great big table, bald man asking the questions. Yes, it's another Webcast, and today we're talking about business productivity. Now, with us today to talk about this, I don't know if you know this, but IBM, people at IBM have won 5 Nobel Prizes. Now, Nobel Prize winners don't often come out to do webcasts, and we're very honoured today to have someone who works in the same company as those 5 people. Garry Gomersall, welcome very much. Welcome.
Very, very nice to be here. Apologies for the stripy shirt.
That's all right. I gather you're a bit of an Elvis fan.
That's my thing, yeah.
Let's see if we can have some fun with that later.
Have some questions about that later, yeah.
Okay. Now, and also with us today, from a company for whom Nobel Prizes are very much on the to-do list, we have the man voted by his peers the second best analyst in the world, the man who puts the bar in bar chart, Jon, not safe for work Collins. Welcome, Jon.
Hello, Tim.
That's the sort of comeback I like.
Absolutely.
Okay, just a quick bit of housekeeping. You might know this already, but just in case you don't, you see the tabs on the top of the screen above my head here. For that, you can ask us questions. Please do that. When they come in here, I ask them here. Don't complain if we don't cover the things you're interested in if you haven't asked a question. Give us your feedback afterwards. We do more of what you want, less of what you don't want. You can find our bios on there as well, and if you want to download the presentation as a PDF, you can do that too. There's some of the slides here have lots of little pictures on them as well, so you might want to hang on to them for later, or else it'll be hard to remember exactly what they said. So with that, business productivity. Jon, why are we talking about this today?
Well, interesting. Maybe this is, I'm a bit more of a Beach Boys fan myself, and so this is my wouldn't it be nice slide. It ain't going to happen unless you can do the harmonies. So the wouldn't it be nice if everything just worked kind of thing. And productivity, it's one of those things, we use terms like this. We use terms like service and process and productivity and agility and all that stuff, and no one actually knows what they mean. So to have a whole presentation on one of those words is kind of bit scary, and our job really in this whole session is to make it very tangible and make it very real and engaging. So the first thing that we thought we need to work out really was what the heck is productivity, and having sort of had a long think about it all, really it boils down to 2 sides of the coin. The first is people, individuals, us, you, everyone doing their jobs, and just trying to be productive in some way, getting the work done in a way that is A, efficient, and it's not a problem for that work to get done. You don't get bored of it, and B, it's effective. So it's actually what the business needs. It's what, at the end of the week you want to say, yep, I achieved something. And then you balance that against the institutional view, if you like, which is the business is out there to sell stuff, to provide services. If you're a public organisation, to minimise your costs and maximise your service levels and all that kind of stuff, has a similar set of productivity requirements, but at the corporate level. And the challenges start to come immediately when you map between the two. There's been this traditional conflict between making the corporate view of productivity, which is often about making people do exactly what the business needs, with the individual view, which is often about being innovative, being creative, working better with peers, and so on and so forth. And within all of that, we as IT people have thought we've come up with the answers on several occasions. So we've come up with things like business process management. It's going to be great. We'll manage business process. It's going to be fantastic. It'll all sort itself out. Collaboration, all these tools, SharePoint, Exchange, Lotus Notes, you name it. It's all gonna make us much better collaborators, etc., etc., etc. We've got all these different stuff.
Exactly. Here's my problem. You see, I've been doing this for about 20 years, and you've been doing it for 2 or 3 times that. And there hasn't been a week gone by where someone hasn't spoken to me about business productivity. So what have we got new to add to this?
Well, to be fair, we're absolutely fantastic at inventing new stuff. So maybe the new stuff line isn't the best one to follow. It's more how we can actually get the old stuff to do what we said the old stuff could do. And it's not like we can just stop the world and make it all work. That's half the challenge, isn't it, Garry? That really we're trying to make the old stuff work at the same time as the world is going to carry on spinning and plummeting through the universe.
And it's very much around inheritance, really. All the good things that we've hopefully delivered in the past in terms of the technology paradigm, the ability to, this chart here talks around the real world of an insurance.
This is the real.
This is a real picture. This is just one example, and the point is that it's an interconnected world, and we want to try and build the ability to be agile in the context of a business that looks like this one. This is insurance. It's around, within your lines of business, inside your organisational boundary, you have the need to interconnect, to collaborate, to be more responsible in how you manage business process. In the same way, recognising you're connecting to a broad network of business partners, different channels to your consumers, different third-party suppliers, and that's really the world that we're living in. And what we want to try and do is improve the ability to be more dynamic and agile in actually managing behaviour that impacts, in this case, an insurance business. So if you're the CEO or you're the CFO trying to find ways and ideas to invest for growth, for innovation, for improving your business performance and business model, you want to be agile in making decisions about who's supplying you, what outsourcing opportunity you may have, what new products you can bring to market more quickly, etc., etc. And that's really the backdrop, part of the context, as we were just talking about, the kind of why we're having this discussion around business productivity. Well, business productivity really needs to be applied at the level of where it can be most impactful to the business performance overall.
And to be absolutely clear, you're not going to tell us about half an hour in to buy lots of new stuff.
Absolutely not, no.
So sometimes we get people in the third chair that do that.
No, it's a combination of, clearly there's a combination of, as the products, technologies, methods and standards have matured, which is why we're having this conversation now, which is why it is a little bit different in terms of what we've been able to inherit in terms of previous iterations of this kind of component view of the world or services view of the world. And we now think we have more conviction, certainly as a technology provider, as well as working with the analyst community around how we demonstrate and put some roadmaps together which are more kind of pragmatic and more benign in terms of managing risk for a business. So that's really the kind of the design point.
So very briefly, for the people that you work, the customers that come to you, what's complicated for them now that wasn't complicated 5 years ago, for example?
Well, I think on the one hand, consumers' expectations are changing. So the whole kind of Web 2.0 story is really about giving new ways of actually accessing and interacting with a business. So there are real challenges as well as opportunities with the whole kind of paradigm around the social networking, the Web 2.0 kind of wave of technology. So that's kind of one area where it becomes more dynamic at that end of the scale. And equally, if you look at the recent collapse in financial markets and the apparent changes that will come around regulatory compliance, for example, not just in the case of FSS, but also if you're talking about the green agenda, for example, the whole kind of meeting next week in Copenhagen and beyond, there will be more regulation around how you manage your carbon as a business. So all those kind of provide impetus that are driving change and accelerating the change function. So that's why it becomes critically important to be able to manage that and expect it and really drive and assimilate that change much more readily.
There's a couple of questions come in already about this. I need to get this straight. Is this just for big companies? Because someone here is saying that this sort of thing's expensive. People, equipment, software, it's complicated. This sort of thinking is only for large organisations. This is a big company pitch you're making.
Well, no, that's a common comment. I think, and I understand where it comes from.
I'm not surprised making it to IBM.
Well, absolutely. But again, when I talk to small businesses and small enterprises, what I say is what they need to be more than anyone else is to be agile. If you're a small company, what do you want to do? You want to grow. You want to recruit new employees. You need to train them, enable them. You need to buy a new production plant, perhaps. You need to move into larger premises. It's all about being agile. And so service orientation as a paradigm applies equally well, if not more so, in the context of small business. And that's my experience. And I think it's about being practical and pragmatic in the decisions you make that actually are driving value for the business. So it's not about a discussion around putting lots of IT necessarily or lots of people into the IT equation. It's about what is going to pass the so what test as you try and drive and growth in that small business.
Okay, and it's your job to keep him honest. If he talks about stuff that small businesses can't use.
I think you can grade small businesses. You've got the very, very small companies, owner managed, etc., etc. They've got Soho kind of small business, home business kind of challenges of their own, and that's not really going to be. That's more about individual productivity and institutional productivity. They're the same thing.
Yeah.
So the conflict exists, but it's the same.
If 5 people work hard, you get 5 times as much work.
Exactly,
Yeah.
that sort of stuff. The companies that start to hit the problems are where there's a board of directors and you've got some IT over here and you've got a bunch of people doing stuff over here, and the business has been running 10, 15, 20 years, and everyone does stuff the way they used to do it, but it's not necessarily the best way anymore. But every time you try and change it, it tends to be adding layer on layer on layer of new stuff that has to kind of work alongside the old stuff. So this is very much about resolving that, and actually how can we kind of just do this once, get the stuff to work in a way that's going to work across the organisation. And it's back to talking business process terms, between the difference between having a functional hierarchy or a process hierarchy. So rather than having sort of sales over here, customer service over here, whatever over here, IT actually offers the opportunity to think of things across. I pass something from sales to customer service does something with it. Very small organisations are doing that stuff in inefficient ways right now. So yeah, it's absolutely for smaller companies.
Well, it's a big ask. Let's see if you can pull it off.
Let's see what we can do. Before we do, let's rattle through a few of these things, because we're kind of not jumping ahead of ourselves, because this is all important stuff. But here's some pictures that many may recognise in terms of what's traditionally happened in the past. And I think IT, frankly, has done a pretty good job of saying, hey, we've got data, we've got application, we can create new things, and we're in this innovation wave. So I wouldn't be sitting here if I didn't think IT was serving some kind of useful purpose. But the downside is it's all moving so fast, and to be fair or unfair to vendors, every time anything new comes out, they say, oh, it's going to be fantastic, this is what you need. It's going to solve all your problems forever. Or that's the hanging kind of statement, the forever bit. And so people start doing something new, and they'll build it, and businesses look at it and think, yep, this is going to be fantastic because it'll help us control our staff better. And so we'll put it in place. And then, of course, the world moves on. You need one simple merger, or 2 companies coming together, or one simple change of premises or whatever, and the whole thing falls apart, and you've got to start again. Only you can't, because you're stuck with it. So we end up with these. I mean, I've picked 4 pictures at random here, and if I go from the top left, that's a kind of collaboration picture. Top right's a kind of service-oriented architecture kind of picture of all these very complex and very kind of clever people are working on these things all the time, bringing together views and modelling and working out how these things can all hang together. But they haven't really done it in a way that it's coherent across the whole organisation and useful for the next initiative. So we end up with initiative after initiative after initiative. Bottom right, we've got process-oriented, process management kind of view of the world. And bottom left, we've got the... I hope everyone's looking at the same direction. Yes, of course they are. We did this last time, didn't we? Bottom left, we've got the unified communications view of the world. So lots of very clever stuff happening. What's missing, perhaps, is the single view in the middle that says, OK, we've worked out what the business is doing. We've worked out how people are trying to work together. And now, how can we feed that information out into all our initiatives?
OK. You used to draw these, didn't you, for a job?
I did used to draw it when I had a real job, as I like to say.
Welcome back to the light side, yeah.
Absolutely. And the downside is that while these things are done with best intentions, as long as they're sort of being done as an initiative and then another initiative and so on, they're not solving some of the fundamental problems of how the business actually works. So how I collaborate with you, how we work together. And there's some very basic facts that I'm sure a lot of people know that around, for example, if I do a job, it will take X time. If I do a job and then I need to give it to someone else to do a bit of it, and then it comes back to me to do the last bit, it'll take kind of X squared time kind of stuff. The handoffs are always going to be expensive. And when you've got different hands-offs between different systems as well, and we've got this horrible thing that still exists in many organisations, large and small, called rekeying, where you take stuff out of your customer management system and then you type it into your service management system, and that requires a person to do this.
And there's some of the practical situations where that's not only just undesirable and inefficient, it's actually dangerous in terms of if you're talking around the ability to audit and be data accurate across that type of process. If you can't show the auditors that that's what you've been able to accomplish and control the process end to end, then there's real risks in terms of your business model moving forward. It's not just about efficiency and productivity, it's about keeping the lights on in some sense. So, I mean, that whole relationship about how you interconnect and how you collaborate across that process view across lines of business is vitally important, if not critically, as a success factor for the business moving forward.
Who's got an influence on this, though? A lot of the people watching this will maybe be thinking, I'm on the receiving end of this. This is a thing that happens to me, but there's nothing I can do today to fix this. Yeah. Are we just talking to the CIOs out there?
Well, no. I think first of all, we should say. I mean, certainly, like I think we were talking about before, there's no panacea. So, as we said before, in IT, we're as guilty as anybody. And actually, the next wave of technology being the answer to all our prayers. Well, it's never that real. That's not the way in the real world. It's an inheritance thing. So, service orientation and governance of business process is part of the answer. It's not the only part of the answer. I think the bridge between the CIO, or the IT departments being the victims of this kind of, problem, is to say, look, let's find a way to communicate which is more valuable to the business between IT. So we've got a common vocabulary, and services orientation and that view of the business is a little bit of more of a natural language fit that we find is more readily consumable by both the business community as well as the IT community, and that's what we hope, and that's a lot of the focus that we have in enabling businesses is from that kind of direction.
Okay.
There you go. It's all good stuff.
Good stuff.
Oh,
Next slide.
It's hot. Okay. So I'm not going to bang on about what's on this slide. The problem is we keep trying stuff. We're not necessarily solving it. We're just carrying on. And we've got these continually fragmented systems. But really, what we are seeing from our research is that generally what happens when we fall into one of these troughs of financial despair, we had one about 8 years ago, we've got one now with the credit crunch, etc., etc. They do offer an opportunity for organisations to go, are we doing everything right? Let's stop and think and get a bit better organised, and maybe a little bit of evangelism there. It's a good moment, do it.
Now we're in what Gary might think is the Heartbreak Hotel.
Yeah. It's good. Oh, it's now or never, in fact, in terms of making change and taking this moment in time. But yeah, we can go on with that analogy all day long. I'll be very happy.
Let's not.
I'm trying to think of a Radiohead lyric.
Don't. This is your slide.
Okay, so this comes from some research we did earlier in the year, where we asked organisations, what are they trying to, what's the best order to solve things? And the answer came, this sort of works in a clock, so the answer said, first thing you've got to do really is sort yourself out. Get your IT. So we asked IT people, maybe the salespeople would have said something different. First thing, get a good car, But from an IT perspective, it was very much get IT sorted out, get it providing a decent set of platform infrastructure services supporting what the business is trying to do today. And from there, you can kind of move around the clock and start to optimize the way IT is actually delivered. You can start to make service improvements. You can start to add new services, etc., etc. And that's starting to then enable you to have a business discussion. You can't just walk into the other side of the house and say, we're all business people now, we're going to sort you out. It's got to be, we're IT people, we're very good at this, and we know what we're doing. You know that we know what we're doing. You trust us. Now, how can we make your lives better? How can we make you more productive? And then from there, the ultimate goal is absolutely helping the business drive its service delivery itself.
Gary, this slide presupposes a perfect world in which you can stop the clock, get your IT all fixed, optimise it, and then start the clock again.
Well, and of course that's not reality, obviously. So it's a heterogeneous environment. The IT guys, like you say, are bewildered oftentimes with the complexity that's in front of them, a huge Gantt chart of project deliverables that they're committed to do to the business. And it's about trying to find ways of analysing the business problem in the domain of the business problem that allows you to be more creative perhaps and find new ways of innovating and driving solutions. So one example, classic example, is where the kind of classic on-the-glass integration of a business process in a portal perhaps, as we would say in IT terminology, which allows you to overcome or hide the complexity underneath what you're actually trying to put onto the glass for the consumer. But that is a way of kind of masking or showing and building a business process that the users are very happy with, that actually gives them more value perhaps in how they're doing the handoffs perhaps between business process. But it's not actually necessarily needing to solve lots of complexity down in the weeds of the technology. perhaps. And so there are different ways that you can get to a better place that is more incremental, which is controlled change, and hopefully if you can do that on a sustained basis, you start to, there's kind of like a throttling mechanism that applies. You can start to open the throttle and get more creative more and accelerate the process of delivery if you can build your proof points in a measured way. So it's about being pragmatic and measured in your approach rather than revolutionary, because nobody's going to buy that, especially in the current climate. If you can't deliver value 3 months, 6 months out, then nobody's really going to listen to you for very long if you're an IT function.
A lot of the time for me, it's really about, it's not about trying to solve big problems. It's about back to removing the bottlenecks and just going out to real people in the organisation and saying, so what do you do? How does it work? God, never realised that you do that, and then you hand off to that person there, and then they do exactly the same thing because they didn't know
that you've done it. Yeah.
And the kind of business modelling workshops and all that jazz that go on, they sound very boring and sound very consultancy. But in actual fact, what often happens in those sessions is it's just getting different parts of the business to talk to each other and start working out what the different parts of the business does.
John, some people will be watching this and they'll be thinking, "You idiot, we do this already." Well, they might not be thinking, "You idiot." I just put that in for effect.
I'd be prepared to accept that.
Yeah, but hasn't a lot of effort already been put into this?
And I do find I've had this conversation with some people, and they go, "Well, of course, don't be ridiculous. Of course." They've said, "You've got no idea how businesses really work," or whatever. But equally, I've sat down with Madge in accounts, and I've gone over to see Fred in the warehouse, and we've had these conversations, and Fred has said, "God, if Madge just gave me that format, I'd be able to save an hour a day." Mm-hmm. It's that stuff we're talking about here, really.
I mean, I agree, and I think that's the kind of paradox we're speaking of, is when you actually, to use the terminology, once you try and codify, so to speak, the understanding that exists in Madge or in Fred, in a way that allows you to inform your design thinking and your implementation thinking, you can then start to really start to solve the problem in new ways, innovative ways, and that's the paradox I talked about. Very simple techniques like having sensible conversation with the people that really do the job of work allow you to build bridges between what the business is really trying to achieve and how it might really be efficient, as opposed to line number 143 on my mega list of projects I've got to deliver for finance next quarter.
If there's one term role I would love to see ruled out forever, it's data entry clerk, because it says you're a slave to the machine, you don't have a life, you are entirely wed to the computer. Your job is, you don't have a job, your function is to just put information into the machine. Get rid of it. Let's have salespeople, let's have customer people, let's have people that interact with people, and the computer is the subordinate thing. But I think that that's the individual productivity side of things, and it's got to link, as you say, back into the top-down view and how the business is trying to drive forward.
Yeah, and so part of in the next slide, part of the bridge back. I mean, we do a lot of work with the CXO, the C-suite community, so that we can endeavour as a technology provider working with business to try and find ways to pass the so what test.
These are the things they want.
Yeah, so this is our analysis from our most recent study that talks about, in conclusion, this is the net slide that talks about, they want to be able to make changes at will. It's the kind of design point for the business, is that as a CEO, CFO, they want to be able to make quick decisions about radical change to the business model and not be encumbered in that change by IT. In fact, they want IT to enable that capability. So that's the kind of nirvana. That's really what the boardroom would like IT to function as. And so you could take a view on particular lines like this. In the case of the bottom around corporate responsibility, for example, that these days is seen as a potential growth agenda opportunity for a boardroom. So down in the level of a necessity to keep the lights on, as I mentioned before, regulatory compliance might be one cell in that diagram that says you've got to, as a minimum, be able to satisfy the regulation requirements. That's what keeps the lights on. But actually what I'd really like to do is turn that kind of capability into allowing me to say, I can evidence, not just in my annual report, but in my ethical mechanisms inside the business and process, that I'm actually being, as it says in the chart, genuine, not just generous in terms of my philanthropy, but actually showing that you're managing your business in an appropriate way that satisfies your shareholder values, but also keeps you compliant and keeps, as I say, the lights on. And that's just kind of one area. That might be a particular focus, a particular type of organisation. And you could go through that list and pick your choice. I summarise it by saying it's really about change. and the ability to be dynamic in prompting that change and assimilating changes as radically as you can. If you can do that, then the boardroom gets very, very pleased with IT if you're actually part of that equation.
But as we can see from this slide, there are a lot of things, and the ability to be dynamic is a simple way of saying you've got to do a lot of very complicated things, but also retain control at the same time.
Yeah.
It's I think we're somewhat underrepresenting the amount of problems this would pose to the people who are watching this.
Having said that, I had the question previously about whether or not this was possible, whether it wasn't possible. I used to work in a very large campus environment with essentially lots of little IT environments, and lots of little IT departments functioning. Some were great, and some were very poor. And I think that the way that if you can consider a tree diagram of the IT hierarchy at an organisation, and you've got kind of the site IT, and then you've got corporate IT, and so on and so forth. Ultimately, it's down to each individual at any point in that tree to oversee what's going on from their role downwards and make that work. And I saw some people that, despite all the cost pressures and balancing acts that had to take place, they were able to deliver. They were trusted. They were getting on with stuff. They were improving it. They were working to optimize the networking. They were preempting bottlenecks. All those things we talk about in the research as kind of, wouldn't it be great if everyone did that sort of stuff? Meanwhile, there'd be other people. It'd be fragmented. It'd be falling apart. There'd be firefighting. They wouldn't understand the business. Everyone hated them. Service level meetings and SLA setting meetings would just be people blankly staring at each other. Yeah. So it really is down to individuals, not just at the CIO level, but wherever you are in the hierarchy, to make sure that your bit is working right.
Well, let's get on, because I'm interested to find out how you're actually going to solve all these problems.
How does it map?
Well, again, so netting all that discussion, and we'll talk about the CIO view of this world. If that was the kind of CEO, CFO view on previous chart, this one is really the kind of net in terms of our research, the analysts' current data around what are the key kind of areas that we want to help, start to solve some of these considerations and these concerns. So around the focus around business process, critical in terms of, most of the service-oriented kind of projects that we get involved with these days are bounded in the context of a business process scope. So that's a key driver in terms of how we drive innovation forward. Collaboration around the people efficiency component, how the teams involved are best mobilized to become more efficient, and how we exchange data between those parties in a trusted way, in a way that respects all the requirements on the business process integrity that needs to flow. And then ultimately, if you can then pull the trick off of combining those three aspects, process, collaboration, service orientation, to drive genuine changes to the business model in terms of its agility component, then that's where you start to get much more profound in your ability to drive business performance. And so again, that's the kind of end game that we're trying to, as part of the how scenario.
John, is this new for people who are watching this?
Is it new? I think the thing that's new is bringing everything together. As I said before, we're very, very good at taking something and running with it. I mean, an example, I was talking to a colleague yesterday about knowledge management, and half of my career I've wondered what the heck anyone was talking about with knowledge management. But fortunately I work with people that understand this stuff. But the fact is, it doesn't mean anything. But it meant something to a very select bunch of people who took it, they ran with it, they philosophized about it, they developed creative things about it that still no one understood. And that's a fantastic thing that we're very good at in this industry, to take something and turn it into absolute gobbledygook. And in fact, if you look at the kind of business process side, business processes are all about, when you understand what you're trying to do, you want to put control into it, you want to make it as efficient as possible. Collaboration is all about this is a collaboration session. When you're working with people, you're trying to make it as effective as possible, make people innovate, very much getting the balance between the two. Service orientation is all about understanding that we're actually trying to deliver a result. So what is the service that's trying to provide? What's the service I'm trying to provide to you, that IT is trying to provide to me, that the business is trying to provide to its customers, etc., etc. And there's a service hierarchy that descends through all the process of collaboration. Of course it's all joined up. The danger, the difficulty that we've faced in the past is that we haven't treated all of this stuff in a joined up manner. Which is the problem. I mean, and that, if anything, I'm just glancing at the clock here, we're halfway through this session, that defines the problem statement, if you like. So the rest of the session is very much on, so what do we do about it?
Better be a simpler answer than the question.
Well, let's hope. So to an extent, it comes back to what I mentioned before about getting your house in order, and rather than right, okay, let's have yet another initiative. It's how can we know what the answers are. These things are pretty much set in stone in terms of process, in terms of service, in terms of collaboration, etc., etc. No one's come up with anything over the last 6 weeks that said, actually, it's not about any of that stuff at all. It's about a whole bunch of different stuff. So some of this stuff was defined in the 80s and 90s. What has happened in the past decade is now it is all worked out. The hooks have all been put into how it can all work together. So moving away from the bottlenecks that all of that stuff in the past have caused, removing the hurdles, getting rid of the stuff that's causing the problems, getting stuff to talk to each other, becomes an integration issue, becomes an interoperability issue in the software layer, getting your BPM stuff to talk to your applications, getting your SAP to talk to your Exchange, getting your Lotus to talk to your etc., etc. That's the big job at the moment. And here I've said IT as a bottleneck. How can we reduce those bottlenecks and deliver IT as a foundation? That's a law of diminishing returns, obviously, but most organisations, they could look at what are the 20% of applications that everyone uses that deliver 80% of the business value. Let's focus on them first. Let's get them all working far better together. Let's get IT as a foundation delivered. And from there, it then goes into, we've made it as efficient as we can. From there, it goes into, okay, we've started to earn the right, we're more trusted by the business. How can we actually then build upon that and turn IT into something that is actually responding to new needs and new requirements and making the business more effective?
I see what you're saying, but that hard work of making everything everything just work. I got that, yeah. I mean that's been the experience of, I don't know, ERP for example has shown that what sounds like a very nice idea in a meeting turns into 5, 6, 7 years of really hard, unpleasant work.
Yeah, and that kind of strategy doesn't work any longer, does it? Clearly, we've gone down that path. Business has been burnt in the past, and so now it's about, okay, how do we repurpose, reuse value in all those things that we've invested in a way that actually gets closer to meeting the business in the middle around what is the services that actually matter. So what's at the core of what I'm operating as a business? What's at the core of what makes me special and unique, and what are my USPs around differentiation? They're the things where it's worth investing some more dollar, in terms of IT change. Otherwise, the IT guys can just burn cycles and burn resources and burn money and not really be positive in the outcome for the business point of view.
So you're saying concentrate on the stuff that's been fixed already?
Or concentrate on the stuff where the business, you can determine with the business's help where you can actually drive the most value. So the next picture is really around this kind of, I think it's the next picture if I've got my storyboard right, is this kind of notion that if you've got a different set of characteristics as a CIO or as an IT leader inside the business, what you want to try and do is obviously find ways to expand your business impact. And whereas you may be driven, and business is responsible for this dimension as much as anyone else is, you may be asked to relentlessly cost cut, for example. Find ways to take out costs. That's what we want you to do year on year end. And that's different from saying, okay, what can we do intelligently in that process to find ways to turn it on its head and look at value rather than just pure cost. So the kind of return on investment piece is much more a conversation that's richer for the CFO to work with the budgeting around IT projects, for example. So again, every step of the way you want to try and find ways, and it's easy to say, not always easy to do, and we recognise that. So the good news is, in terms of the how, there's real methodologies around this, there's real best practice, there's real methods, tools and products that can help this process.
I'm looking at this slide, Gary, and the things that are along the bottom, which I'm assuming you're saying are not the things that you should be.
No, I'm saying...
They sound like the things that get people jobs in IT and get them to keep their jobs.
What I'm saying is that all those things are absolutely necessary and actually very resident in the CIOs that I talk to. You need all those attributes, you need all those characteristics, but it's basically finding ways to blend those together in a way that's pushing towards the right to say, overall, actually what you want to do is IT needs to be seen as an enabler for positive change, and it's actually improving the business impact.
I think one of the major changes, and you hinted at it, Gary, was that we've seen in IT over the past 5 years. following the dot-bomb probably, was I can remember meeting with an IT director 6-7 years ago, and I think it was one of the last instances of this happening. If you still see this happening, then let us know. But his boss, he was the CIO, he'd been given by the CEO a copy of something like CEO Weekly or Management Today or something like that, and it had a big article about probably CRM. I think it was CRM, but it could have been something else. And the boss had circled the article and written, "When can we have one of these?" and chucked it on his desk. And it's this kind of, it was this idea from the non-technical side of the business that IT could just be, it was this kind of magic bullet mentality. What we got in the dot-bomb was no more magic bullets, end of story. IT is not just going to work in that way. And the debate has moved, no one is saying, well, I saw a recent attempt around cloud computing, which we're not going to go into, but this, when can we have one of these attempt, you get your articles posted, but no savvy board these days is saying, when can we have one of these? What they're saying is, how can you sort it out? And that's an opportunity as much as anything to sort it out.
Well, let's get to some ways that we can sort it out to make sure that we've got the time for that.
Yeah, and again, I mean, in that context, of course, you've just been describing, is the kind of the word service and service orientation. That model is the thing that allows you to extend out to the kind of Web 2.0 world we're talking about, and indeed paradigms like cloud and software as a service kind of all rely on the fundamental view that says we now have a componentized view of how we put together our business that allows us to be more dynamic in our response to market opportunity, market threat, market change, but is actually allowing us then to leverage all that great new technology wave which is coming from with cloud, for example. And again, that's off the topic, but the point is it kind of makes some assumptions, and I think it's fair 5 or 6 years into this kind of whole paradigm, this iteration of the IT world, to make some assumptions now that the right way about going to assemble your IT capabilities is to try and publish sets of services that are more meaningful for business. And getting that granularity right, the next chart is really suggestive of sets of formalized methodologies, some of which are open standards now, that talk around how you start to analyze your business either from a top-down point of view or a bottom-up point of view, and a way of actually talking business and IT collaboratively together in the middle to try and build, in this terminology, a service model, so to speak, that says, actually, this is the 80-20 rule of what's running my business. These are the things I need to maintain. These are the ones I need to build service level agreements around. These are the ones I need to optimize and use all the capabilities, all those bright peoples in the business department, within sales or within supply or within HR or whatever it is, that actually can apply their best thinking around optimizing the process. We need to enable that.
I think there is a small business, large business skew on this thing as well. So the things on the left that are being described are very much applicable to any business. So understanding what your business is, how it's structured, and then understand what it's trying to deliver, and then work out how best IT can map onto that delivery. 10-person company, 1,000-person company, 100,000-person company, those rules apply.
Yeah.
When you get into the much bigger companies, it's both a benefit. You've got a department that is designed around doing that kind of stuff, and they've been hopefully specialists in their field, so they're good at it. So that's a plus, and also they've got the remit to do it. In smaller organisations, a lot of this stuff has to happen along the way by people that are also doing their day jobs. So that does make it harder, but it doesn't stop the fact that these are the same kind of steps that you need to work through. Moving on.
Yep. So again,
I'm sorry before you start on that one. I just got a terrific comment, and I have to put to you right now. It's the real question is not how can we sort it out, but what does this do for us? And the guy says that the CTO hasn't got the cojones to challenge the board. I love it when we get mild obscenity in our comments.
Interesting.
It really grabs my attention.
I'll write that one down.
Yeah. It's basically, we talk about this world of the CIO and everything.
Absolutely.
But actually what happens still is the technology organisation in many is still the junior partner.
No, absolutely. I think that there is that almost deference at times, but it varies by industries in my experience. So telco environments, which we'll talk about a couple of examples in a second, where technology is much more core to the business model and maybe perhaps a little bit more receptive to change and have a little bit more proximity to the CIO to the boardroom is a little bit more closely knit, perhaps, than some other industries like manufacturing or distribution. So I certainly recognise that. And one of the kind of responses, of course, is this whole method around governance. It's a big question, a big G around governance. And so we've now, as IBM, published through the Opens Group now, the formal method that we've been using for the last 3 years, because we recognise that's one of the kind of things that inhibits the kind of cultural change aspect of this discussion. So we can make lots of statements, as we've been doing this morning, about collaborating and business and IT using the same vocabulary, etc. But it's really around there are now methods that, and in fact tools that implement the method as well, to keep you really honest. In the absence of any other device that allows and encourages the business and IT to work more close together, you can actually make recourse to a process and a method that exists off the shelf now. So we recognise that it's a common problem, but really it's about, at the end of the day, it's around people. I mean, being productive is around getting smart people together that know about their job, that have got a real passion about what they're trying to do and trying to make improvements. And businesses that are trying to innovate and businesses that respect their people value will recognise that. And so, again, you can put in method where there's an absence of any other process to do that. And again, it varies by industry and varies by size of company, but I think you do need to give some help from that kind of cultural aspect, and that's a much more softer skill around emotional intelligence and stuff, where there's no real answer. There's no one answer, at least, to that.
The anecdote I can remember was about you talk to the COO and he'd say, yeah, this is where we're expanding and this is the cost benefit and this is the state of blah blah blah, and all very businessy. And you talk around. Imagine, go around the board. I'm not going to give the whole thing. Go to the CIO and you say, yeah, well, we've just installed Oracle 10.3.15.2.n, and well, that worked okay. And now we're going to look at Exchange, and it's got no business relevance whatsoever. But the thing that gets lost is that the theory is that the IT guy has to somehow become a business person, and I think that's a big mistake. It's this: the IT guy has to be the best possible. The IT director has to be the best possible IT guy in the organisation. He has to understand exactly what technology is bringing to the business, but see it in a way that makes sense to the business, and not see it from a technical perspective. So very brief, because as you're up against it,
is that a question of sort of sometimes sort of like saying to the business, if you don't do this, then there will be a big fail happening somewhere?
So some fear, uncertainty and doubt, that's one strategy that works. But it's about being savvy in that previous diagram. That word, there's some political element how you need to operate inside your business organisation, and different hierarchies and different rules apply depending on the kind of maturity or size of your business. But actually just being savvy, really, about, yes, understanding what's available to, hopefully as an IT director, you kind of get a view of what the industry has and what the vendors have to help support you, and the skills of your people and how you need to progress those skills. At the end of the day, you've got to be in the room thinking and talking and articulating in the sense that the CFO or the guy who's funding your projects understands the value that's going to come to him. And we use this phrase around instrumentation. If we talk about working smart inside IBM, there's a big story around how you put your metrics in place through that whole discussion, from the whiteboard in the boardroom through to the design of your business process, through to implementation of your application, all the way along the line, going back to a metric that this is what you told me, Mr. Sales Director or Mr. CFO. This is what you're interested in measuring, and that's the value that we've just given you that metric back. Tick in the box, please. Give me some more money. And that's the kind of way it needs to work. And just building a culture of change along those kind of dynamics is what we're trying to promote.
That's pragmatic.
Yep.
Okay, now we need to keep moving on.
So I was just going to, very, very quickly, just to say, in the same way we have heterogeneous complexity in IT architectures, the same can apply in the process context. So doing business process management properly is not a panacea as well. You can still create issues in terms of maintenance cost and difficulty and agility if you don't recognise right at the outset, as you're modelling this process between Fred and Madge and whoever else in your organisation, that change in the process and variability is something you have to manage. So that's just a kind of an aide-memoire to remember that it's just as important at the process level as it is at the IT level. And I'll talk about one specific example of how that manifests in a second.
Absolutely. And I'm just flicking to the questions, Tim, if I may.
I thought you did that, yeah.
Yeah. Someone's asked the question, do you generally feel that SOA is the only way to move forward?
Exactly what I was going to ask you right now.
And that is a fantastic segue into my next slide. And the answer is no, frankly, because if you start thinking about it from that point of view, SOA being a thing, then it's just like we did in the past, and
it's like
you're already lost.
It's like buying a CRM or
it's not a thing. And actually, what I've got written in my notes, it's not about service-oriented architecture. It's about having an architecture that's oriented about services. The services are the key thing, and starting to think in terms of services, starting to think about what IT is delivering to the business, what the business is, etc. All that stuff I said before is a mindset shift. It's a way of thinking about how you put your applications together, how you put your IT together, how you work between IT and the business in a different way, and that absolutely is the way forward. But the reason why we see SOA initiatives are failing is because SOA initiatives, when they're seen as a thing, you put all your hopes into getting something around a technology that gives you SOA, and maybe the organisation hasn't changed. And so you've just ended up with yet another one of these very complicated pictures. Well,
that's the thing. Gary, you might disagree with that because you've got SOA in your job title.
Well, again, so I very much agree with the fact that it's an approach, it's a mindset, it's a method, and it's a combination of various things that help you deliver that method. So a combination of products, technologies, tools, and standards that allow us to get to a point of resilience in a discussion. But you're right, it's about, unless those change, any IT change, whether it's SOA bounded or not, has got to be linked to a business outcome, and it's got to be measured as so. And so there's no SOA police that's going to come along and beat the IT department on the head, or indeed the business analyst on the head. It's just a very useful way of thinking about trying to find a common language around services that are meaningful for business. That's the way I approach it, and that's the discussion that we kind of major on. And indeed, it does absolutely do that. It does demonstrate to both parties in the organisation that if you can agree that this customer credit check is the service that's important to pensions in your FSS organisation, that's the thing we want to try and improve and model and be more agile. That's what you will build.
So starting as small as that.
Yeah, and the granularity is the key component about keeping the scope in a managed and controlled way. And this thing around throttling is that we typically talk in terms of maybe 30 to 40 core business level services, not hundreds and thousands of IT level service operations and web services. It's about what are the 20, 30 or 40 or so key business services that we want to aggregate, we want to reuse, we want to profile and optimize that are going to really drive value. Okay. And that's the one that we need to work on.
I'm sure that the phrase paralysis by analysis is very familiar to a lot of our listeners out there.
That's your job. We need to move on because there's a couple of great questions here and I want to make sure you answer them.
This doesn't make it any less challenging. That it's not a thing, it's a mindset change. Mindset changes are very difficult, as you know. There are 3 things that dropped out of research that we've done around this in terms of organisations that get this stuff better than other organisations. They're on the slide. It's this proactive attitude to change. It's IT as an enabler. It's having business already bought into the thing, so IT sort of can join in some way. That gives you a bit of a way forward. So we're not underestimating that this is difficult. We're just saying, if you want to get there, this is the kind of journey you're going to have to get on.
The journey you follow.
And I think importantly, and this came out of the same research, the point I want to make just talking around this chart is that the top 2 bars aren't that different in terms of we've got these kind of wonderfully organised IT departments and brilliant CIOs that everyone else aspires to be. We call them celebrity CIOs, those sort that you read about in the CIO magazine. They're kind of, oh God, I wish I could do it like that. And they're like your mate that's fit, that's bright, that passes all their exams and can play squash and thrash everybody. The fact is that we're not trying to get people to look like that because it would be impossible and it wouldn't be our job. What we are trying to do is say it's that bottom bar you don't want to be in. You don't want to be the kind of organisation or the organisational sub-part of the organisation that is causing the problems here. You don't want to be the fragmented one. You don't want to be the firefighters, etc., etc. And the goal is to get people into that middle bar, essentially. Not everyone's going to be the kind of celebrity IT organisation, but that middle bar is absolutely open to
more important to get the bottom bar up to the middle than to spend a lot of effort.
Absolutely, and this applies just as much for being oriented around services as it does for being good at business process, as being collaborative. We get this same picture every single time. I could have put up any one of 10 charts on this particular one.
Yeah.
So again, this is the kind of real world example I was talking about. So this is a well-known telco in the UK, satellite broadcast provider, where
that narrows it down.
That narrows it down very nicely. And again, they talk very eloquently about this, how they manage business process. So highly agile organisation, growing very quickly, very innovative in terms of its business model. So you may have a core business process end to end. In this case, managing a new subscriber, new customer, essentially to your services, and you've got to recognise that you've got new service providers, new content providers, new geographies, different technologies to get out to the endpoint. I read in the paper last week about the innovation to put online gaming down the broadband pipe as the next kind of content provision that they want to put forward to the screen. So my point is, and you've got different service levels to support for gold, silver, bronze, different types of customers, etc., etc. The point is, lots and lots of change. And if you want to genuinely be innovative, this is an example of a company that's basically saying, I've got my mainline business process for managing my new digital subscriber, but I need all this variability to be properly managed, properly controlled, properly auditable, properly financed, so I can actually invest in new content and new technology and new innovation, because you're driving a business process and an environment as an IT function that can support that real world type of environment. So that's a very good example of an industry that's rapidly changing, that has by its very nature to be innovative in terms of how it uses technology. And it's really around taking control of that process in the middle and controlling that properly.
This is a fairly new company, though. They don't have, they started off in a technological, digital environment.
So I accept where you're coming from.
Yeah.
And so bit-based industries like telcos, guys are not moving atoms. If you're building cars, yes, you've got a different challenge in terms of how you innovate the production line of building a car. If you're dealing with bits flying over a network, it's different. I accept that proposition. But actually, they're still connecting with partners that have all that kind of issues around how you exchange data. They may be using old techniques like EDI or other types of integration technology. But the process, the unit of work whereby you interact and collaborate and interconnect needs to be governed and controlled. And so there's heterogeneity in the entire network, not just for the internal.
But hang on as well. I mean, I've worked for a bit-based organisation as a consultant various times. I'm sure loads of people out there have. Just because it's a modern organisation or a modern that doesn't mean that they work in a modern way. They have the same old traditional problems that everyone else. It's the same old folks that are running them that have come straight from a very old.
Yeah, and a case in point, that the physics of actually putting the satellite dish on the roof of somebody's house requires some business process around organising delivery time, getting the worker schedule organised, getting him in the car, driving through the snow. His GPS telling him he's broken down or he's stuck in traffic, renegotiating delivery times. There's lots of process around what events occur in the real world that are actually trying to be managed. And I think, again, service orientation is a device, along with controlled business process and collaboration, that allows you to be much more creative in managing, in that case, customer satisfaction in terms of a delivery promise, for example.
And that does link into one of the other questions we've got as well, which is it's not what's happening now, it's the what's next. And that's a very big issue is for people at a more senior position in any size of organisation, being able to go to the board and say, this sort of thing is starting to happen. If we can either take advantage of it to save ourselves money or to reduce risk, or there's a big compliance thing around the corner, or actually it's going to help us reach into new markets, etc., etc. It's very hard to get a handle on that and explain it to the board, because we talk about the board. It's a bunch of folks that are getting on with their jobs. They've got to be convinced in a very compelling way that these things are going to make a difference. Otherwise, they're just going to go, yeah, whatever, tell me about it when it's real. Yeah. So
and also traditionally, the split of expertise has been the board has been the people who are looking ahead to the next business problem, and the IT department are the people that have been putting the systems in place that make that possible. And we're saying here that there's an element the IT department has to take up the running on that. And to start looking ahead like that, that's a lot of work.
And the boardroom has to create the conditions where, as we said before, that there's no kind of differential, or different juxtaposition between the business and IT. They've got to be working together. And if the smart boardroom's clear about its intention, they'll encourage that behaviour.
I think the bottom line for that question, which I do want to answer, was, is there any advice you can give me?
Yes.
I think the key word to me in all of this is the trust one. There is no simple way of going to the board and saying, right, we got all this sorted, off we go, you can trust me. That's got to be built, that trust and respect and so on has got to be built over time. I would say to that reader, please do contact us offline, because it's a very big subject of how to build that trust. I'll send you a book, mate, all right? and anyone else that wants one, up to 2. We wrote a book called The Technology Garden, talking to CIOs across 40 organisations and said, how do you make this work? And we put it all into the 6 Habits of Highly Effective CIOs kind of book. So if you want an advice, then have a look at that.
How many books are you going to offer?
3.
3. So we've got one counted for.
There you go.
The next 2 comments to come in asking for one. We'll get it. We'll get a book from John. Just if we move on to this last slide, because I want to ask the question over it. It's another question that we've got here. The problem with this sort of with SOA especially is it forces people to be measured by what they achieve, and this is very uncomfortable in terms of how the organisation works. So someone's saying it's difficult to sell this to the organisation.
So it's kind of like another Elvis cover of a Jim Reeves. It's welcome to my world, guys. I mean, I think that's the real world, yeah? And it's also, and to use that analogy one more time, if I may, suspicious minds. It's about making sure we can handle suspicion in the people that are paying.
Give it to us one more time.
Who are paying, seriously. I'm sorry about that, guys. You did indulge me.
Don't be cruel.
Yeah, don't be cruel with these questions. We could go on and on, but anyway, we'll bore the audience. But yeah, it's about being convincing, and the way that we talk about this to make it real and pragmatic and practical is to say, when we say instrumentation, we really mean let's at least capture what are the measures that are important and make sure we implement those, because that's the way it keeps everyone honest. So all that great stuff that these IT guys can deliver and all the clever people who are in the IT function, if they go judiciously about their work in a way that goes back to a real measure, that the business is, on the business guy's dashboard, so to speak, on his mashed up dashboard, you can actually see what's really happening to the business operationally, and we've actually ticked the box in terms of the proof point. Then everyone gets, the trust builds, the confidence builds, and then you can start to then throttle, as I say, the progress that can be made more quickly. So that's the kind of, the counsel to deal with those suspicious minds.
It really is around balancing this individual needs versus corporate needs. When I was an IT manager, I was a bit of a control freak. I hasten to add. And to me, it was all about locking stuff down. It was about securing it. It was about reducing risks, etc., etc. And it took me a long time to work out, actually, I was preventing people from doing their jobs. And the balance to strike is between getting the stuff that you can lock down, because that's saving money, so that you leave as much as possible opened up so that people can be actually innovating and developing and bringing things forward. So that's what, it's back to this productivity question. And if I can say, one of the things I've read recently around the things like downturns is that, and I've got the note written down here, is that business is just like comedy. It's all about the timing. You see what I did there? It's Tim's looking at me like,
I see what you did.
But the timing in the downturn, you can make the mistake of locking things down too late as you go into a downturn, or you can open things up too late as you come out of a downturn. And it really is about getting that business timing right of when you're in the downturn, absolutely, let's try and maximise the hell out of, get the efficiency absolutely knocked out of the shop. But then as soon as things start picking up, or as the signs start looking like they're going to be picking up, it's about working out how you can make the business more effective in this particular case, through the use of all these wonderful different IT capabilities, collaboration, business process management, SOA, that we have in our tool chest. But it is a tool chest.
Okay, now, thanks to John's comment about timing, because we are actually now out of time. See what I did there. And we will contact the people. Oh, there's a lot of comments in from people who wanted one of your books, John. So we'll contact the people who won that competition rather than try and do it now. Thank you very much for tuning in. We hope that we are helping you to make your business more productive. Let us know if we have helped you. And thank you very much to Garry and to John, Not Safe for Work Collins. Always valuable what you have to say. And my name's been Tim Phillips. Thank you for joining in, and we'll see you next time. Goodbye.
Thank you. Goodbye.